My family wants me to cancel my wedding date so my sister can get married first. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and my fiancé and I have been engaged for about 18 months. We've been together for years, and the plan has always been to get married next spring. We've already booked the venue, paid the deposit for the caterer, and locked in a photographer. All the big stuff is done, so I was starting to feel like we could just relax and enjoy the countdown to our wedding day. But then all hell broke loose to set the stage a little. My family is big and pretty close. We have a lot of traditions, and weddings are a huge deal. My sister, who's 25, just got engaged recently, and while I'm happy for her, she's had a rough time trying to plan her wedding. The main issue is that she's been struggling to book a venue for the date she wants, and that's where the drama starts. She's been pretty vocal about being envious of the venue we booked. Every time she brings it up, she calls it perfect and goes on about how her family can't afford something like that. I didn't think much of it. Lots of people talk about wedding envy when they're planning, right? But I didn't realize how deep her jealousy went until a family dinner a couple of weeks ago. We're all sitting there having a pretty normal meal when my mom starts making this weird speech about how amazing it would be if my sister could use our venue. I'm sitting there, fork halfway to my mouth, thinking it's a joke, but she keeps going. She's talking about how my sister is younger, and since her is in the military, there's a chance he might be deployed soon. According to my mom, it just makes sense for her to get married first. And wouldn't it be so lovely if we moved our wedding date so my sister could have the venue? At this point, I'm still processing, because what my fiancé and I had this date booked for over a year. Everything's paid for, but my mom is dead serious, and my sister is sitting there nodding like it's a done deal. She's furious, and I can't blame her. The whole thing is completely ridiculous. She doesn't even say a word at the table, just gives me a look that says, do not even entertain this idea. So I politely but firmly tell my mom and sister that there's no way we're changing our wedding plans. And of course my sister bursts into tears, full-on waterworks at the dinner table. She storms out, and my mom goes after her, throwing us the most disappointed look I've ever seen. The rest of the dinner is just awkward silence with my parents clearly uncomfortable, but not saying much. I thought maybe that was the end of it. Maybe my sister would cool down, realize how insane the whole idea was, and we could all move on. But nope. The next day my phone is blowing up. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, you name it. It's all from various family members, and the general message is that I need to think about family unity and be the bigger person. My sister must have gotten to them first because everyone is acting like it's some small ask, like all we'd have to do is snap our fingers and the wedding plans would magically change. Some of the messages are trying to guilt trip me into giving in. It's just one small sacrifice for the sake of family harmony, they say, as if moving an entire wedding is no big deal. My mom calls and starts talking about how weddings are supposed to bring families together, not divide them. She's going on and on about how disappointed my grandmother would be if the family couldn't get along for such an important event. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there staring at my phone feeling like I'm living in some kind of weird alternate universe. My fiancé is understandably furious about all of this. She doesn't even want me to entertain these conversations, and I don't blame her. It's our wedding, and we've worked hard to make everything perfect for us. I'm feeling overwhelmed, so I do what any rational person does in the age of the internet. I turn to Reddit. I throw up a post explaining the situation, asking if I'm being unreasonable for refusing to change our wedding date. I'm half expecting people to, yeah, family comes first. You should consider it. But the response is intense. The post blows up. People are furious on my behalf, telling me to stand my ground and not give in to this crazy request. Reddit support is great, but it also makes me realize how ridiculous this whole situation is. My sister even texts me, and either I give up the date or she won't come to the wedding, and she'll make sure the rest of the family doesn't either. I didn't think things could get worse, but now it feels like my whole family is turning against me because I won't let my sister hijack our wedding. At this point, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to stay calm and not let this ruin the excitement of our wedding, but the pressure is getting intense. My fiancé and I are on the same page. We're not changing anything, but with the family piling on, the guilt and my sister basically threatening to blow everything up, it feels like this is just the beginning of a much bigger mess. I woke up the next morning to a phone buzzing nonstop. On my nightstand, half asleep, I reached over, thinking maybe it was work or a random spam call. But no, it was family again. More texts, more missed calls. My grandmother was leading the charge this time, urging me to do the right thing and keep the family together. It was like they'd all gotten the same script overnight. Everyone was suddenly on board with this idea that I should just hand over our wedding date like it was no big deal. The guilt trip was real, and I could feel the pressure building. By mid-morning, I was trying to shake it off, but then my parents showed up at our place unannounced. They looked serious, and I knew this wasn't going to be a casual visit. My fiancé and I let them in, and right away they jumped into this whole spiel about family traditions. My dad was saying how in our family, it's always been customary for the younger sibling to marry first if they're ready. My mom was trying to be more emotional about it, saying how torn up the family is and how she's worried this whole situation is going to cause a permanent rift. It was heavy. My fiancée wasn't having any of it. She stood her ground calmly but firmly, letting them know that we weren't going to move our wedding date. That conversation with my parents was just the beginning. My fiancé and I stood our ground, but the tension kept building. They left our house upset, clearly frustrated that we hadn't given in. I thought that maybe, after venting, things would calm down, but that's not what happened. The next day, I got a message from a cousin saying he was organizing a family dinner that weekend and wanted me to attend. It felt like a trap, but I decided to go. I thought maybe in a calmer environment, we could talk things out reasonably. My fiancée didn't want to go. She was tired of the whole situation. And honestly, I didn't blame her. When I arrived at the dinner, it became immediately clear that it was an ambush. Everyone was there, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and the topic was obvious. Before I even sat down, my mom started talking about how the family always overcomes difficulties and that the sacrifices of today are the foundation for a stronger family tomorrow. My grandmother, who has always been the matriarch of the family, looked me directly in the eye and said, "If you don't give in, Lucas, we will never be the same. You're tearing apart the harmony of our family." The atmosphere was tense, and I knew I was about to be attacked from all sides. As I finally sat down, my sister started speaking. "Lucas, I understand you've planned your wedding, but this is bigger than you. It's our family. I'm not asking for much. I just want the chance to have the wedding I've always dreamed of before my fiancé is deployed. You can get married afterward, right? After all, true love waits." She said this with a smile on her face, like she had already won. My stomach turned. She was manipulating the situation, as if it were my responsibility, not hers, to fix her wedding issues. My blood started boiling, but I stayed calm. I knew that if I lost my temper, it would only make me look like the problem. "We're not changing our date," I said firmly. "Everything is paid for, and we've been committed to this plan for over a year. It's not fair to ask us to throw everything away because of problems that aren't ours." My sister made a face, as if I had said the most heartless thing in the world. Then, to my surprise, she started crying again. But this time it was different. It was a calculated cry, almost performative. She looked around the room as if I had hurt her irreparably. My aunts started shaking their heads in disapproval, like I was the villain. My father, who had been silent up until then, stood up and said, "Lucas, if you go through with this wedding without changing the date, know that we won't be there to support you. You're breaking the family apart with your stubbornness." That was the final straw. I stood up, my heart pounding. "So that's it? You're all willing to emotionally blackmail me into destroying my own wedding plans rather than hold my sister accountable for her own? I'm the oldest, and if you think it's fair to put all this weight on my shoulders, then I'm the only one here who actually cares about what's right." My mom tried to intervene, her voice trembling with emotion. "Lucas, please, you know your grandmother can't handle seeing the family torn apart. If you go through with this, we'll never be the same." I was about to respond when something unexpected happened. My phone started ringing. It was my fiancée. I stepped away from the group and answered. Her voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Lucas, I love you, but if you keep giving space to this manipulation, it's going to tear us apart. We can't get married with this pressure on our backs. Either you put a stop to this, or it's going to destroy us." It was an ultimatum I hadn't expected, but I knew she was right. I went back to the room and, without sitting down, said, You want me to choose between my fiancé and my sister? Then I choose my fiancé. If you can't respect our plans, then you're not welcome at our wedding. And don't think I'm going to change my mind." The room fell silent. My sister wiped away her tears, glaring at me with pure hatred. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger. "So that's it?" she asked in disbelief. "That's it," I replied, already turning to leave. "You're all choosing to support a selfish demand instead of celebrating an important moment in my life. You made the choice." I walked out without looking back, my heart racing, but my head held high. When I got home, my fiancé was waiting, and I knew I had made the right decision, even if it cost me my relationship with my family. The following weeks were hell. I received messages from family members cutting me off from future events, treating me like I was a pariah. My sister made sure to spread the story that I had abandoned the family over a wedding date. Even some childhood friends stopped talking to me, buying into her narrative. But deep down, I knew the only people who truly mattered were standing by my side. My fiancé and I moved forward with our plans, but the emotional scar of this betrayal never fully healed. On our wedding day, my family didn't show up. The seats reserved for them remained empty, but I felt a strange peace. I looked at my wife and knew that I had made the right choice. My family might have tried to tear me down, but I had built my own family now, and nothing, neither jealousy nor manipulation, could take that away from me. After our wedding took place without my family present, I knew things would never be the same. From that moment on, I decided to cut ties. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The emotional manipulation, the lack of support, and the constant pressure made it clear that to move forward with my life alongside my wife, I needed to fully distance myself from that toxicity. Not long after, my sister managed to have her wedding. She finally found a venue available, but the event was a disaster. The catering was poorly organized, her dress ripped before the ceremony, and the atmosphere among the guests was tense. Some people even remarked that the energy of the event fell off, almost like everything had been forced. She tried to keep up appearances, but it was clear to everyone present that it wasn't the dream day she had envisioned. To make matters worse, her marriage didn't last long. Less than a year later, she and her husband separated. The constant fights, the stress of his military job, and family pressure led to everything falling apart. And as expected, I was blamed for it all. My mom, dad, uncles, they all started to say that if I had just given in and changed my wedding date, my sister wouldn't have had so many problems. They claimed that karma was coming back to me for dividing the family. The messages became frequent, and there was constant pressure for me to apologize and try to reconcile. But I was resolute. My wife and I had worked too hard to build our life together, and I had no regrets about the choices I made. We knew our focus was on ourselves, and we were thriving together, working as a team. As time went on, we became financially secure. We started our own business, something we had always dreamed of, and success came with a lot of hard work. Every accomplishment was a reminder that we had made the right decisions by stepping away from the negativity. The peace we found in our life together was non-negotiable, and there was no room for the demands of my old family. However, with our success came another wave of manipulation. The family that once accused me of being selfish started showing up with financial requests. At first, they were small, disguised as loans that, of course, would never be repaid. Then, the messages became more blatant. My dad would call asking for help with household bills. My sister, now divorced, sent messages saying she was struggling and that, as her brother, I had an obligation to help her. Even my mom, who once accused me of destroying the family, claimed I needed to make up for the damage I caused by offering financial support. They acted as if I owed them something for not giving in to their demands in the past. But I didn't cave. After everything I had been through, it was clear that these people were not interested in my well-being, only in what they could get from me. They saw me as nothing more than a resource, a solution to the problems they had created themselves. They were no longer my family. They were just people related to me by blood. And blood alone isn't enough to sustain a real relationship. My real family was my wife, the one who stood by me through every moment, every battle, and every victory. That's when I made my final decision. I blocked all their contacts, deleted the messages, and completely cut off any ties with them. There was no longer any space for these people in my life. I had built a new reality with my wife, a reality where respect, mutual support, and love were the only foundations. There was no more manipulation, no more guilt, no more pressure. I didn't owe them anything. If they couldn't respect my decision, then they didn't deserve to be a part of my life. Now my wife and I live in peace, focused on what truly matters, ourselves. What I have with her is a true partnership, a family I chose to build and protect. The others, they are just echoes of a past I left behind. And honestly, I don't miss any of it.